I'm really looking forward to talking to my next guest, particularly after having my own little girl who's now 2. The whole journey of pregnancy and post-pregnancy becomes really, really important in terms of women who want to continue with exercise. Because some women can get through the journey brilliantly and not too many side effects, but others don't have that experience and they need quite significant help to help them function well physically in their own lives, but also particularly if you want to get back into exercise. So joining me on the line now is Martina Dunne, and she is the owner of EduFIT Team. And she's a specialist, a qualified personal trainer, but specialising in pre- and post-natal fitness. Martina, thanks very much for joining me. It's lovely to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Diane. Like yourself, I'm really passionate about this whole topic and helping as many people, many women get back to exercise as possible.
Yeah, it's so important because, you know, particularly if you were very, very active before, so it's built into your life, it's what you do, it gives you all of the benefits and, you know, even mentally it keeps us well and all of these things. And then, of course, you go through the 9 months of pregnancy and that results in absolutely massive changes for your body. Physically, structurally, everything, and your mind, of course. And then you have this little bundle and, you know, of course everyone is delighted to have their little baby and please God and thankfully all is well and all goes great. But then after a certain period of time, I think you realise my body doesn't really function the way it used to. It certainly doesn't look the way it used to. And I want to get back to that, but there's a journey involved. And I suppose why I want to talk to someone like yourself is, you know, you're trying to struggle with, well, I have to get ready to go back to work. I have to try and figure out how to take care of this little baby. Or maybe you have multiple children at home and you've been through this process many times and there's so many demands on you. And then it's like, right, but I need to try and get myself back to myself. So, you know, let's go, let's give it a shot. But, you know, often we need help and we need some specialist help. And this is what you do and what you love. And that's why I'm so excited to hear from you. Can I ask you, Martina, why did you get into this area?
I suppose back, like, when I was 18, I was playing rugby with the local club in Portarlington, and I noticed that when the women got pregnant, obviously they stopped training while they were pregnant, but they never came back to the sport. And it really sort of started to make me wonder. I just thought it was, you know, people were busy. I you know, at 18 you don't really think about the changes a woman's body goes through during pregnancy and then postpartum. And then when I got qualified as a personal trainer, I was working in a gym in Dublin and I was the only female member of staff. And I was, as the only female member of staff, I trained a lot of women, and it started to, I suppose women would just come to me, I'm pregnant, and I thought, God, I really don't know how to train you now. I don't know how to look after you and give you the best care and the best advice. And then, you know, I had other people who would say, you know, when they got comfortable with me, they'd say, like, listen, when we do that exercise, I feel a bit of heaviness down in my you know, pelvic floor, or I'm leaking a little bit with jogging or running. And I really just felt like what I'd learned as a basic personal trainer just wasn't enough to help these women. And then it all kind of clicked. It was like, that's why these women never came back to the rugby when I was 18, was because they weren't getting the help to rehab their core, their pelvic floor, you know, get strong in their body again, because really most of the time you're deconditioned for 9 months and then, you know, for the time afterwards before you get back into exercise. So I started doing, I did a course in Dublin, and then I did one in America with Girls Gone Strong. And the more courses I did, so I did the first 2 courses and I just thought, this is brilliant, but I need to know more. I need to go more in depth here, and this is solving half of the problems, but it's throwing up 100 more other problems. So after that, I just kept, I've done another course from America, worked with a physio from Australia, and I'm just, you know, we were very lucky. We have a great physio in the north called Grania Donnelly. She actually wrote or co-wrote the Return to Run guidelines. back in 2020, and I've done her course on diastasis. And it's just this sort of, the more you know about something, the more you realise you don't know.
Exactly.
And each individual is different, so it presents a different challenge and a different problem each time you meet someone.
Yeah, so I can absolutely tell from speaking with you, Martina, that you get this, because it's another kind of branch of. I'm a clinical exercise physiologist, and we are very aware of the benefits of exercise for all different types of clinical conditions, but every condition has special considerations, and then within that, every person has special considerations. And of course, pregnancy is no different to that. And as you said, everybody needs great care. And I think it's important for women to hear that, you shouldn't just, it's not your responsibility to just know what to do. So just because in the past, you may be kind of expected to just get on with it, but things are different now, and there are people who are qualified in this space to help you, because the reality of the situation is a lot of women are absolutely suffering post-pregnancy, and but of course there are things that we can do to really help ourselves. So the advice would be, of course, is that exercise, once it's appropriate for you and your level, is safe, and it's very, very good for you, and it's very, very good for the baby during pregnancy. Now, within that, it's not the time to start training. So if you haven't been training, we need to take things very, very easy. Like back in my own personal trainer days 20 years ago, I remember women coming in to say they'd been advised to exercise, but they hadn't done any before pregnancy. So it's not the time for getting fit, but there is definitely a certain amount we can do. So will you take us through kind of what are good things to do and what are safe? And I know we're talking, this is a very generic conversation, because it has to be when you're not dealing with a particular individual in front of you. But just give us an idea of what you would do in that stage of pregnancy for women.
The American College of Gynecologists recommends that pregnant women in all trimesters get 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise throughout the week. Now, obviously, you don't have to do that all in the one go. If you're going for 5 days a week, 30 minutes, that's perfect. The research around pregnancy is a little bit sort of vague, because obviously there's ethical considerations around that. Margie Davenport's a great Canadian researcher, and they've recently done a research study on looking at the minimum amounts of exercise, and even 10 minutes of walking reduces your risk of gestational diabetes by 25%. And if you add 5 minutes, it goes up to 40%. So, I think walking is great. Like you're saying there that, if you had never trained before, it's not the time to get fit. It's not. It's definitely, you don't PR or PB when you're pregnant. It's all about maintenance, and it's all about just making sure that you're still strong, you're still aerobically fit, but you're trying to maintain that fitness throughout the 9 months. There's a little bit of deconditioning, but on the whole, you want to make sure that you're doing something.
Walking is really great. Now, you mentioned something else that I think is important, and I would have done it myself because, and I've only had one child, I can't speak after that, but I do remember the physical changes in the abdominal and the hip area. And to be honest, for me, the hip area was quite painful. So I said, okay, what I actually did was, and of course I was trained and have been trained for a long time in flexibility, aerobic, strength conditioning and everything. But what I actually did was I took down my aerobic stuff a little bit, and I actually did more strength conditioning, because I really felt that all of the muscles that surround my core and my hips, they needed extra work. And what I found was at the beginning of sessions, especially when you wake up in the morning, there was kind of pain and stiffness there. But when you ease into it and work into it gently, and then maybe after a few minutes into my strength and conditioning session, you can feel it start to go away. And for me, I think strength work was actually really important in my journey, and something I certainly would do again if I was to have another child.
Completely. And the American College of Gynecologists recommends that, in that 150 minutes, there's 2 global strength sessions in the week. And that is literally just because of postural changes, like that, the laxity in the pelvic area and the core. Like your body is changing so much, that a bit of strength training is just helping to keep those aches and pains away. So lower back pain, stuff like that. So yeah, if you are familiar with weights, yeah, definitely keep them up. Obviously, you're reducing your weights, possibly reducing reps and increasing rest. And you want to change your breathing technique. So if you're familiar with lifting weights, you might do something called a Valsalva maneuver, which you take a breath in, you hold your breath and use it to help your abdominals brace as you're lifting something heavy. Whereas we don't want to be adding more pressure to an already stressed system, because the core system is already under a little bit of stress at that stage.
Yes.
You want to breathe throughout the movement. So breath is really important during pregnancy as well.
Absolutely. Now, Martina, I'd love to talk to you about postnatal fitness, and if we can actually be honest about this, can you just give us, like, anyone who has given birth, they'll all have their own story and they'll all have their own changes and things that they need to work with in terms of their own body, but you've such extensive experience in this, and you've worked with so many women in this area. Will you just give us some idea of some of the things that women experience post giving birth that can be very greatly improved by the correct type and amount of exercise?
Oh yeah. So the first thing is like diastasis recti, or the abdominal separation. We're seeing sort of a hypervigilance about this now. Particularly, a lot of the information that we have comes from America across. So they've become more aware of it, and most people are aware of diastasis recti now, which is your ab separation. Now, 99% of women will have an ab separation at 39 weeks gestation. So we need to remember that it's completely normal. However, if it's not returning to, if it's not reducing in depth or width, or you're not getting tension and good function back through the core, that needs to be looked at. So diastasis recti is probably the main thing. Then the musculoskeletal changes. So the glutes and the hamstrings get really weak during pregnancy. They get long and they get stretched. The hip flexors get tight. So that means, like, and we know this about our glutes, they're our power muscles. So if you want to return to running, it's really important to be doing like adequate glute exercises, even just for back pain and stuff like that. That's going to support your core as well. So I would say core considerations and glute considerations, and then upper body stiffness. So particularly with women, even if they don't, if they're bottle feeding as well as breastfeeding, they kind of sit in a rounded posture, so shoulders are rounded over, and that can create tight chest muscles, which can lead to shoulder, neck and upper back pain. So being, like, I would say the three things that we do in postnatal classes, and I think that everyone should do postnatally, is to breathe correctly for your core, and a few core strengthening exercises. Do some upper body stretching and mobility, and some back strengthening exercises, and then to do lots of glute and hamstring work to get the posterior chain functioning again, so that you've got that power back for, hiking, running, cycling, whatever it might be.
Even just daily life. And just to explain, sorry, to our listeners, so the glutes are the big muscles in your backside, basically. And there's lots of them there, and they're very big, powerful muscles. And the hamstrings are at the back of the thigh. Okay, so they're the ones that Martina was just talking about. And very, very important to rehab those. And thanks, Martina, that's really good advice. And lastly, can I just ask you about this pelvic floor? Okay, I have been working with women for 20 years. I've been working with women of all ages who have had one to many children. And some women really, really have a hard time with their pelvic floor, and I know there is great advice out there, and I know that the HSE have some programs and advice, and I know that there are people that you can go to, but I think that you need to understand that it's not like you can't rehab the pelvic floor in a few minutes or a couple of sessions. I think that it's something that we need to understand. It actually takes for me, it takes like a training program to try and get that strength and conditioning and functionality back. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, and then have you any advice for us?
So I once heard the pelvic floor described as something that holds everything together. And I thought at the time, oh my God, that's just it. I've suffered with my own incontinence issues, and I don't have any kids. I've never been pregnant. So for me, it was really challenging, and I only sought help after the pandemic. And like you said, it wasn't a one session and you're done. It was a really progressive, great program that helped me to move from static pelvic floor strength, so I could do Kegels and I had an okay endurance and strength there. But when it came to impact, my pelvic floor just wasn't able for it. It would get tired really quickly and then I would leak. So having someone that is really understands the difference between static strength and dynamic strength. So most pelvic floor is assessed when you're lying down with an internal exam. But it's how do we translate that to walking, running after the bus, running after the child, jumping on a bouncing castle at a birthday party. All really important things for, women to be able to do to fully enjoy life. So I completely agree with you. The breath has a lot to do with it, and plus it's looking at the whole system. So we chatted about the glutes before. The certain leg muscles, your abductors tie through your pelvic floor, and because it's more than one muscle, it's looking at how do we get everything functioning right. There's diet and lifestyle factors as well. So constipation is a real problem for your pelvic floor. Drinking too much coffee or tea, which is something that I see a lot of in women. Not drinking enough water, because our bladders are sensitive, so one, caffeine can be an irritant and can cause sort of increased trips to the toilet. But also, if we're not drinking enough water, and this is something that I would have experienced, because you have that fear of leaking, you think, I'm heading off on a car journey, I'm just not going to drink anything before I go. Your urine actually gets concentrated in your bladder, and that creates the irritant as well, and then you need to go. So it's finding the right balance of strength training, impact training, and the lifestyle factors that help the pelvic floor. And I think as well with pelvic floor training, we need to be doing it. It's about maintenance as well. I know we're talking about post-pregnancy now, but we think towards menopause. It's use it or lose it. So if we don't have that strength now in our 30s and 40s, we're definitely not going to have it in our 50s and 60s. So we're trying to do everything we can now to keep ourselves healthy going forward for when we're older.
Absolutely. This is just so important, because only when you work in this area, and obviously being a woman, and as you said, not just from pregnancy but for other reasons, this really impacts people's lives. It really does. It impacts the decisions that you make. It impacts, the journeys that you take. It impacts everything. And then it just becomes the norm. And then honestly, I have listened to so many women's stories about how much this has impacted them. What I want to leave our listeners with now, which is the most important thing, is that it can always be improved. It can always get better. If you get the right advice and the right training program and put some time into yourself, it can absolutely get better.
Yeah, completely agree. I was probably, when my incontinence was really bad, I was probably leaking every day. So I used to wear a lot of black leggings to work. And, when I was running, I knew all the spots, where I could go to the toilet. I knew if I was running a particular route where all the toilets were. And now I'm, if I leak once in a month, it's probably because I've missed time something, or I've had the second cup of coffee that day when I know that one cup is plenty for me, and it's hugely improved my quality of life as a 34-year-old woman. And I can only imagine however many other women are out there dealing with the issues that I was dealing with, and maybe worse, and just feeling like there's no help out there, there's no hope. But there is. It's once you put in the time, it's actually quite it's quite enjoyable if you get the right program. Sometimes a lot of stuff can be very mat-based and that feels very mundane. You have to do the foundation work, but then you should have a pelvic health physio that will progress you on to doing stuff like bounds and skips and jumping on a trampoline, because we need to have the pelvic floor strong to meet the demands of the exercises you're going to be doing. So if you're going to be running after a kid, you kind of need to be doing, a bit of jogging. If you're going to be jumping on a trampoline or on a bouncing castle with them, you need to be doing that as well intermittently, so that the pelvic floor is still getting of adaptation.
And even Martina, laughing and coughing and sneezing, like women have awful trouble with that.
Yeah. And it's that's just a mismatch in timing, that like basically your pelvic floor is either too slow to come up, or it's tense before you cough or sneeze, because obviously you have that, oh my God, I'm going to cough or sneeze and I need to pre-tense my pelvic floor, and then it can hold for a certain length of time, and then it releases, and that causes the leak. With the really, I find really interesting with the pelvic floor is, so when you're doing a Kegel, say you can reach a grade of, because normally they grade you from 1 to 5, say you can reach a grade of 3 out of 5, but when you actually jump, and say you're doing just one jump and get plenty of rest and do another jump, you're actually getting 400% of that max voluntary contraction with each jump. So it's a really easy way of getting the pelvic floor really strong, without having to do, tons and tons of Kegels.
So if any of our listeners, Martina, would like to get in touch with you, how can they reach you?
I'm on Instagram as fitmna, so fit.mna. My email is just martina@fitmna.com, and they're pretty much the two channels that I'm most active on and most reachable. And I'm more than happy if anyone wants to reach out and ask any questions. I'm more than happy to direct them to the right place or answer it as best as I can.
Martina, thanks so much for joining me, and the very best of luck to you and all of the lovely women that you work with. Thanks, Martina.
Thanks, Dan.